Welcome to the Gateway House podcast. We're at T20 Mumbai. Today we have Seshadari Chari, Executive Director, Forum for Strategic and Security Studies. Turkey's presidency of the G20 has come with the three I's: inclusiveness, implementation, and investment for growth. How does the fourth I of infrastructure fit into this G20 agenda?
No, infrastructure is a global issue. In fact, all developing countries and developing economies are now seriously concerned with the issue of infrastructure. Now, infrastructure comes into the category of both the global issue and also the local issue. So, country-specific infrastructure projects are very different, and then global investment in infrastructure project is another issue. So, G20 has to be mainly concerned with the global investment regime as far as the infrastructure projects are concerned. But I think there should be some sort of a leverage available to the countries while they are debating this issue of global infrastructure regime. And moreover, infrastructure is an issue that does not concern directly does not concern the G20 as far as its global agenda is concerned. So this was some of the issues that were discussed. And more importantly, in the Indian context, infrastructure has to be mainly concerned with rural and urban infrastructure. And then when it comes to urban and rural both, there are other issues and subjects like education infrastructure, urban infrastructure, medical infrastructure, and more importantly, two infrastructure areas where we have not really done much is rural and agro infrastructure.
The SDGs were just announced a few weeks ago. How do you see the objectives of a sustainable infrastructure fitting into the multilateral goals of something like the SDGs?
You see, infrastructure basically can be classified into two groups: the MDG SDG infrastructure category and the non-MDG SDG infrastructure category. For example, one of the MDG was housing for all. So now it's a massive infrastructure area to provide housing for all. None of the country in the world in these 15 years from 2000 to 2015 has been able to achieve the target of housing for all. Even the most developed countries like the US or the least developed countries like some of the Southeast Asian countries or even the African countries. Health for all is another huge infrastructure area which we have not been able to cover. So these are all MDG, SDG infrastructure areas, and there are other areas like, for example, construction of cold storage in some rural sector for agro products. Now that is not an MDG, SDG infrastructure area, but it's a huge area that fuels economic growth and also helps other issues like unemployment. So these are the two sectors that we should be able to divide and look at infrastructure from that point of view. To that extent, MDG and SDG both are pointers and pathfinders as far as the infrastructure issue is concerned.
Right. And lastly, what are the ways that the government can encourage the private sector to invest in sustainable infrastructure and vice versa?
Private sector involvement in infrastructure has been an ongoing issue. But what has happened is in the Indian context, infrastructure development has been mainly concerning with the government of India. So government basically. So almost 95% of the infrastructure projects are under the mandate of the government. It's very important to involve the private sector in infrastructure, but at the same time, the most important element that we have to discuss as far as infrastructure development is concerned in the private sector is the return on investment. So how to incentivize the private sector and the PPP model in order to bring more capital infusion into infrastructure projects and at the same time look at the issue of sustainability, lack of rural development, and how to prevent extreme urbanization and also how to ensure return on investment. Without these aspects, I don't think the PPP model will work very well.
Thank you for sitting with us and sharing your views on this subject. You've been listening to the Gateway House podcast. Stay tuned for more.